M. The Media Project. The Vermont Technology Alliance. The VTTA is the only statewide organization focused on Vermont's tech business sector and entrepreneurs. Our business members are Fortune 500 companies, startup founders, small business owners, and soloists. We provide advocacy, recruiting of tech talent, events, and other networking opportunities. We are the heart of the tech ecosystem in Vermont. Become a member now at vtta.org. The Vermont Technology Alliance. Tech thrives here.
Hey, it's a great, bright, and slightly foggy at the same time. Good morning here from the wilds of Vermont. You are listening to another Innova802 episode in our series on rural tech here at the Are We Here Yet podcast. As always, your host, co-host, Scott Graves. And my cohorts here on the Innova802 staff, which is vast, by the way. It's just vast.
Yeah, over here, Ryan.
Over here. Ryan Munn,
connecting
Will
people.
Jeffries.
Ryan Munn and Will Jeffries coming from their respective places, White River Junction and
Burlington, Vermont, by way of Hula today.
By way of Hula. Oh, you're over at Hula. And Will Jeffries, as an aside, and then we'll get right into our guest, is on a grand tour of New England co-working and technology hub spaces, I've noticed.
Yes, wrapped that up this past weekend, actually. Took a trip down through southern New Hampshire, visited the Hannah Grimes Center for Entrepreneurship down in Keene, New Hampshire. Amazing work that they're doing there. And also definitely check out their event that's coming up in September, I believe, Radically Rural.
And check out episode 153 of the Are We Here Yet podcast, where we speak with their director, Julianne Dodson. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the Tech Hub projects that have been nominated throughout the United States. Vermont is pleased to have to play host to one of these projects, and we have the regional innovation officer for that gallium nitride chip project, Doug Merrill. Doug, good morning, and how are you doing?
I'm doing great in sunny and quite warm Burlington, Vermont.
Awesome. So, gents, does anyone want to kick this off first with the first question for Doug, or shall I?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about you, Doug, in terms of like kind of what brought you to where you're at today. So I'm really curious, what brought you into the role that you're in personally, in Vermont and leading this gallium nitride initiative.
Sure thing, Ryan. Thanks. Good question. And yeah, if you look at my LinkedIn biography, you might wonder what makes you qualified for this.
Sure.
And I wondered that myself a little bit.
Not quite my question, to be fair, but absolutely valid question.
We didn't do that, Doug. We just, you seem like a good guy.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So my background, I've had over 30 years in primarily high technology manufacturing, capital equipment manufacturing. Not necessarily, most of it has not been in the semiconductor field. So I got my start with General Electric in their manufacturing management program, sort of rotated through a couple different businesses there, and spent the majority of my career with GE Energy, running manufacturing plants for steam turbines, and then working in their business development team, helping them do mergers and acquisitions to add things like wind energy and solar energy and other renewable sources. I left GE in 2005 and moved to Vermont to run the operations for Husky Injection Moldings facility in Milton. Very large machine shop, similar to my roles at GE, and primarily for quality of life. I was moving more and I was traveling a lot. And my kids were young, and we decided we wanted to make sure that when they were going through school, that we weren't relocating them every couple of years. And we sort of made a commitment that we were going to make Vermont work for at least 14 years while they got through school. And we're at 19 years and have no regrets. It's been a great place both to raise kids and to continue a career. And since I've been here, I was director of operations at Husky, spent 5 or 6 years as a consultant, working with local and regional companies on manufacturing and supply chain strategy. And then moved back into the corporate world as the director of operations at Dynapower, ran a solar hot water company for a couple of years, and then was asked to run SemiProbe, which is a small semiconductor test equipment company in Winooski, and ended up staying there for 6 years, where I sort of learned a lot more about the semiconductor industry. The two founders got decades of experience, so I was much more the operations and finance expert. They are the product and technology experts, but they taught me quite a bit. And had been talking with the University of Vermont about how to get engaged to help make UVM more closely linked with local technology businesses, with a two-way flow of having our resources help those businesses, but also making sure our students were getting great opportunities to work in those businesses. And we've had some new leadership here in the past 5 or 6 years, starting with President Garamella, and continuing on with VP of Research Kirk Dombrowski and the Dean of the Engineering School, Linda Shadler. And when I kind of mentioned that to them, that I'd kind of like to help sort of give them some advice, they said, we don't need advice, we need people to help. So could you come help us and come work for us? And so starting last year, when they won the Tech Hub designation, they said, here's a meaty project you can run with for the university. We really need help. We need someone with connections to the local high-tech business community, someone with connections to the local capital markets community, and you seem like you have that background, and we'd love to have you join the team. And so I did.
And so the project itself emanates from the legislation passed known as the CHIPS Act in 2022, correct?
That's correct.
It's administered by the federal EDA. This is for our listeners who are, have heard news stories, but maybe are so tangential to this that they haven't paid close attention, right? So it comes from there. The funding comes from there. And a series of tech hubs, regional tech hubs, were selected by the federal government throughout the United States. And walk us through a bit of how what the selection process is to get funded, and also maybe at the same time, because it makes sense because it's close together, what does it mean for the financial stack for this? In other words, is there a sort of a bit of a complex financial stack that needs to be created in order to fully fund a project from beginning to end?
There is. So the CHIPS Act authorized billions of dollars for many projects across the United States, and it was divided up among several federal agencies to make sure the funds were going to different regions, different purposes, and ensure they were all going to have high impact. The funds we're working with are in the Economic Development Administration, which is a unit of the Department of Commerce, and they created what they call it EDA, the Economic Development Agency, the EDA Tech Hub program, to stimulate economic development in rural and underserved areas through technology commercialization. So that's the mission of the Tech Hub program. The University of Vermont learned about this. They launched that program in May of last year, so May of 2023. They announced that they would be accepting applications over the summer. The University of Vermont had begun a pretty close collaboration with Global Foundries in Essex Junction to adapt our curriculum to make sure the College of Engineering and Mathematical Sciences graduates we were graduating had the skills necessary to be effective at Global Foundries. And so over the past 3 or 4 years, the college has been working with the Global Foundries to add some courses. We've developed certificates in semiconductors, both at the bachelor's level and the master's level. We've built out some lab facilities, and Global Foundries and Keysight donated some equipment to make sure that the equipment that the students were being taught on was the same equipment that they would be working with when they got to industry. And through that collaboration, we knew that they were developing a new substrate for semiconductors called gallium nitride. And we understood that this was going to be fairly revolutionary in the semiconductor space in the United States or around the world. And so the university approached Global Foundries in the States and, I think we could build a tech hub around this technology in terms of commercializing gallium nitride. And all three partners said, yeah, that seems good. So they buckled down last summer and got a proposal into the Economic Development Administration. And frankly, we're a little surprised in October when we were told we were selected as one of the 31 tech hub designees of the over 300 applications around the country. It was wildly
big deal.
Tons of applications, and we were selected. So it began kind of a magic scramble to say, okay, now that we're selected, the tech hub designation did not come with any money. It was a designation, and it allowed us to then compete for funds. And only tech hub designees can compete for these funds. The whole program has been authorized for up to $8 billion, billion with a B, over the next, I think, 5 to 10 years. About 500 million were authorized to be distributed this summer. And so less than 10% of the funds were going to be distributed this summer. And a request for proposals of the designated tech hubs was issued last November, once the designations were made, with a due date of February 29th of this year for proposals to implement the tech hub projects. And we built a consortium, submitted a proposal in February for 6 sub-projects, requesting about $36 million in federal funds to get this tech hub launched. And it was an unbelievable effort to pull this together. I can't remember the count of partners, but it was something like 45 different partners in the education, municipal, and corporate spaces, with a lot of work. And it was a terrific proposal. It was a lot of work, but once submitted, I don't think any of us felt like, oh man, there's a bunch of stuff we wanted to get into it. We didn't. It was a very comprehensive, well thought out proposal. So we were really proud of it.
Great. So talk to us a bit about how funding, so there's going to be a series of rounds, right?
Yes.
And in fact, our intrepid reporter here, Will, was down at New Hampshire's, awardee in this first round, right? And maybe the two of you can talk about that in a moment. But there's going to be a series of rounds, right? Once you're a nominee, once you're a designee, rather, right? You don't lose that status, and it's just a question of like, which round can we possibly get funded in, right? So is there? I'm going to guess, is there a process that you're working with the EDA right now to determine, hey, these are the areas that we need to see, more meat on the bone, or what? Walk us through what's currently happening.
Sure. Well, we haven't said it explicitly in the podcast yet, but I will. We were not selected for an implementation grant when they were announced on July 2nd. We were obviously very disappointed, but went through the 5 stages of grieving and got through it.
We're in fact now generally here in the state of Vermont preparing to invade New Hampshire to take their award. And no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And the EDA, to their credit, the Tech Hub team anticipated this. I mean, they knew they were not funded to the level they would like to be funded, to ensure that all the tech hubs with worthy proposals were funded in phase 1, and they told us that up front. I was in Washington, D.C. last week for 2 days at the Department of Commerce with the other regional innovation officers from the other 30 tech hubs. And they began to walk us through this process of what are the next steps. And their first, their message I came away with very clearly was, they said, okay, 12 of you are totally swamped because now you have the award and it's a ton of work to actually put it to work. Yeah. It's fun. You've got half an hour where you're all jumping up and down, and then you've got probably 3 or 4 months of really hard work.
It's like running for office, right?
Exactly.
It's like you do all this work to get there, and then you go, wait a minute, now what?
So there were 12 people in the room that were looking kind of shell-shocked, like, wow, this actually happened. And they said, look, and there are 19 of you who I get it. There's probably some grumbling and some bitterness and things like that. We get that, we accept it, we apologize. They said, but keep in mind that we had well over 300 applications for this Tech Hub designation. And the 31 of you are in the room here today, both those that were funded in the first round and those that weren't funded. And you all 31, we have full confidence that you are the future of innovation in the United States in rural and underserved areas for the next 10 years. And we are committed to making sure this works. You put together great proposals, and we're in this for the long haul. You all need to be as well. And if it's feeling a little bit raw, get over it, put your head down, get back to work, because we all have a lot of work to do to make this work. I mean, it was a great message, and I've done my best to share that with my team here. And the good news is we're actually on Monday hosting Deputy Assistant Secretary Christina Killingsworth from the EDA and some of her team for a site visit with the Tech Hub Consortia. So we have a really, really full day planned, starting at 9 a.m. here at UVM and finishing up at 5:30 at OnLogic, with stops at Global Foundries and stops at Resonant Link, to make sure their team understands how broad our support is, how comprehensive it is, and how this is going to make a difference for the entire region. And she is very clear about the fact that her team wants to make sure that our consortium hears the same message I was fortunate enough to hear last week, which is we got one battleground news, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. And everybody, stay tuned, buckle up. We're going to do this.
Sounds great. And it sounds like, to my first question, you're here for the right reasons. That was part of my question too, right? It's not so much about the qualification. It's the endurance to be a Vermonter and take the first licks and keep on going. That's awesome.
And so it also sounds like it's not a no, it's a not yet or different.
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly right. And so the other, you did ask a question of, so is there going to be an opportunity to get some feedback from the EDA that said, clearly they did choose 12 projects to be funded and had to leave 19 behind. So there was something about those 12 projects that they looked at as probably either more ready or higher payback. Will there be an opportunity for us to adjust our project to learn from those 12? And the answer is yes. And on August 16th, we have a meeting with our actual proposal review team at the EDA, and we're going to gather our full proposal team, and they're going to go through and step by step and say, hey, here's what really worked, do more of that, or don't drop it. And here are a few areas where we think you could improve and add more resources to make the project even more compelling. So we're really looking forward to that August 16th session. We are hoping that on either Monday or the 16th, we get a little bit more clarity about when this next round will be. In fairness to EDA, they don't have, they can't give us a definite answer because this is going through the legislative process and the money needs to be authorized for the next appropriation. And as most of us know, Congress and the Senate are difficult things to predict. The good news as well in DC, Senator Schumer and Senator Wilson from Indiana, who were the co-authors of the CHIPS Act, brought us all together along with the NSF Regional Innovation Engines leaders, and said, everyone, look, this was a bipartisan piece of legislation. There are a lot of things that our legislators are not agreeing on these days, but the CHIPS Act is not one of them.
Right. Like the reshoring, particularly of this product, at a moment where there's a next gen of the product is pretty important. I mean, generally we've experienced in our economy, and not just with COVID, but of course it was worsened and accelerated, this idea of, oh, we don't make anything here anymore. Right. And that's a real problem. Right. And this is like a prime example of like, hey, maybe we want to successfully reshore as quickly as possible.
Exactly. And that's exactly right. And I've spent my entire career in manufacturing. And so I love manufacturing. And it really kind of, it irritated me when I heard people say, oh, manufacturing is dead, it's not a career anymore. And in fact, the value of US manufacturing has been increasing steadily, almost without fail for the past 100 years. the number of jobs has dropped, and I think we've let it drop a little bit too much, and the value has gone up, but not uniformly, and there hasn't been a real strategy for what do we keep here and what do we not keep here. And that, I think, our legislatures and hopefully the general population have realized, yeah, we can't just let it go totally laissez-faire. We need to put some guardrails up. And I putting a finger on the scale sounds a little bit sort of nefarious, but we have to recognize that a lot of our competitors have got their fist on the scale. And we need to make sure we keep industries that are necessary for national prosperity and national security, that we have capabilities there.
And the true reality for 200 plus years is we've never had a quote unquote free market in the way people think it's a free market. There are always guardrails. There are always parameters through policy or through gravity in the marketplace that are determining how things are done. It's well documented, Doug, the destabilization in the first generation of chip making in the United States, and there's a Harvard study that's a great book from the early 90s about how the Massachusetts Miracle sort of failed over time while Silicon Valley flourished, and the reasons why, right? That have to do with venture capital growth, that have to do with a whole bunch of factors, actually, and culture, ultimately. That's fascinating. I'm wondering if anything learned from the first gen, right, of chip manufacturing in the United States from the late 1940s, right, post-World War II innovation, to, say, through the 80s, right, when it destabilized, and then eventually much of it went overseas. I'm wondering if any of that went into whether it's the Vermont specific project or even with the EDA's sort of ask to the country, because we have a lot the good news is here, we have a lot to learn from the past. We've kind of done this at least once before.
Right. I'm not familiar with the Harvard study. I haven't read that. So after this, please forward me that link. I'd love to.
I'll let you borrow the book.
That'd be tremendous. And I did read Chris Miller's book, Chip Wars, which was highly, if you haven't read that, I recommend it.
That's another great book. Yeah,
it is.
For real.
And as soon as I took the job, I grabbed that and read that. And it was a really good primer. And I can't speak to whether or not the sort of the relative success of Silicon Valley versus the Boston sort of tech corridor was influential with the EDA and the NSF in their CHIPS Act policy or not. I suspect some of it was, but I don't know that. But I can tell you that the decision to have to fund Global Foundries development of gallium nitride certainly resulted from some assessments on national weakness in this technology. And gallium nitride does some really amazing things. It allows us to have very, very fast communications devices because it turns on and off really fast. That same quality allows it to have the most advanced radar driving chips are made from gallium nitride. And I suspect, but I haven't seen the actual memos, but I suspect that the Department of Defense sort of looked at where gallium nitride was going and said, we need to be able to lead the development of gallium nitride in the world. This isn't a technology we can afford to lag in. And at that point, I don't know what the decision process was that paired the DoD with Global Foundries Fab 9, but Fab 9 began about 3 years ago with significant support from the federal government and a lot of their own investment to develop a process to make the gallium nitride substrates here in Essex Junction. So they're not just making chips and the lithography, they're actually preparing and producing the actual substrates here, because the substrates are a real choke point. They were only available in Asia, and there was no point in developing a technology that if the raw material was cut off, we'd be unable to continue to leverage that technology. So we're making it right here.
And just for our listeners' understanding, so that substrate is the raw material upon which the gallium nitride tipped chips are manufactured. You need to start with that blank, essentially, and then you have all of the processes that go into that to create these advanced chips. And maybe also just for a little bit of context, I know we've been diving into the high-level economics of this and the motivations, but can you throw out a couple of examples where everyday people might understand where these chips are important and how they're applied?
Absolutely, I'd love to. And to give an analogy that I think will make it a little even clearer, at least it has with my family. Um, when we talk about a substrate, if you think about a pizza, the dough is the substrate.
Mm-hmm.
And so almost all the chips we work with in our daily life, the substrate is pure silicon. And silicon is a wonderful material, and we've got 70 years now of incredible advances in building circuits on silicon. Gallium nitride is a different substrate, and some manufacturers use sort of solid gallium nitride for their substrates. It's very difficult to work with. It's highly expensive. What GlobalFoundries is doing is depositing a very, very thin layer of gallium nitride on a standard silicon wafer that's been prepared especially for it. And so it gives us
on that pizza crust.
Exactly. It is a incredibly thin layer of sauce.
And is the improved performance of these chips basically a conductivity issue? Is that what?
It's a couple things. It's improved conductivity is probably the most noticeable benefit.
Imagine a vibrant region that embraces innovative technology and systems, allowing individuals and businesses to grow and thrive within the natural and cultural lifestyle of Vermont. Imagine the Black River Innovation Campus. Our community includes business and technology programming, co-working and technology tools, and other exciting experiences that are quickly creating an outsized impact to our little corner of northern New England here in Springfield, Vermont. PC Mag rates Springfield, Vermont number 8 for the best work-from-home cities in the U.S. Join us in Vermont. Begin your journey at bricvt.org.
It's a couple things, it's improved connectivity is probably the most noticeable benefit. And as I mentioned, the ability to turn on and off is a phenomenal benefit as well. And what this does is it allows a lot of devices to be run more efficiently. So improved connectivity makes electricity flow with less heat loss. And the first application that most of us benefited from, usually without knowing it, is our phone chargers. So if you've replaced your phone in the past 3 or 4 years, when you took it out of the box, you may have noticed the little puck that goes into the wall was probably about 2/3 the size of the old one. And your phone charged about twice as fast. So it used to take 6 hours to charge a phone. You had a reasonably sized puck in the wall, and it would get warm. Starting about 3 or 4 years ago, the pucks got smaller. They don't heat up very much, and your phone charges in 2 hours. And that's because they're using gallium nitride FETs in that little puck to rectify the AC power and step it down to the low voltage DC power that your phone needs to charge. And it went without much fanfare, but it's a great application. It's nice having our phones charged a little faster. We probably each save a few cents a year on our electric bills. But if you add up that efficiency, I mean, since almost every person in the nation has a phone, and you're being a little bit more efficient, that's going to add up to some electricity saved. But if you start to scale this, there's some applications where it makes a huge difference. And one that a local company here in Vermont, Resonant Link, is working on is in the medical implants market. So for things like insulin pumps or implanted defibrillators, those devices have batteries, so that you don't have to have an opening in your skin, which is an infection vector. And they're typically charged wirelessly by putting a coil over your skin to get power to that battery charger. And it's a fairly slow process. And part of the reason it's slow is because you can't have any temperature increase. You have to have a very, very small temperature increase in that implant because it's in your body, and obviously you don't want to be cooking things. And so for some of these devices, it's like a 6-hour process to do the charge. Resonant Link has developed this a patented proprietary new very thin coil that develops very high magnetic flux densities. And they have combined that with a gallium nitride powered battery charger to do implants that are basically about 10 times faster in charging than traditional medical implants. And so if you've got an implant and you typically had to go to an outpatient medical office once a week to have it charged for several hours, and now you can do this at home in an hour while you're cooking, it's a huge life change, which is tremendous.
And it sounds like scaled, it also is helping us with the not so small problem of, as we convert everything over to electricity, including our automobile fleet, right? It sort of can help reduce the capacity at any given time on the grid, which is a substantial problem with that conversion. It's really ultimately a timing issue, I guess. When we bring new technologies on that
Right.
require only electricity versus another energy source, but
and
I
bring
can see
that
where that can
speed
help.
and bring that speed and flexibility. I mean, one of the major detractions for consumers and users and even infrastructure systems with electric vehicles right now is the charging time, that it takes hours to charge a vehicle's battery as opposed to 5 minutes at a gasoline pump. So if you can reduce that by 10x, suddenly it makes that option more available, more viable for a lot of people or different situations.
I know we have some great companies in sort of the ecosystem that are even potentially even still open to investors, but I'm curious if there is maybe a silver lining or an opportunity with the delay that you're looking at right now for this to be an early investment opportunity. Right? This is an ecosystem that we're pretty confident it's going to grow. It means there's probably some good early investment actors to get involved with. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about anyone you can talk about as far as like that ecosystem of investors, both in Vermont and outside developing, as well as what we might want to get to as a message out to some people that are interested in investing and really finding the dynamic of investment opportunity that Vermont offers. Because it's not, there's a lot of upside in these technologies, but there's also a lot of opportunity in the kind of leadership that we represent here and the kind of collaboration that we're talking about growing from.
Sure. That aspect was really important to the EDA in our proposal. They really want economic development, and they're willing to fund the seed of it. But they asked each tech hub to demonstrate, as companies get spun up, either spun off or founded on these technologies we're growing, what is the capacity in the region to incubate those companies and get them funded and get them launched? And we spent a lot of time thinking about this. And we're fortunate in Vermont that over the past 20 years or so, we have built up a community of professionals that are I think really go out of their way to help lift up small businesses. And I'm hesitant to mention something because I'm going to forget some, but I will mention a few, and there are more. But I mean, you look at VSET, Hula, Launch VT, Generator. There are quite a few resources out there. And they work really well with the funding sources. So I mean, VSET has the seed fund, Hula has a fund, Fresh Tracks has been at this a long time, and there are several others as well. And we pulled all those stakeholders together in probably February, and Corinne Farwell, who runs UVM Innovations, sort of led this effort and created the name of the VGAN Venture Group. And at this point, it's sort of an advisory board. And so we said, look, we don't really have any firms right now that are looking for funds, but our expectation is over the next 5 years we will, and we want to make sure that that we are putting in place the building blocks necessary to make these funds successful. And so we're tapping on people that have launched these companies, funded these companies, to make sure that we're not missing anything. One of the aspects that I'll take a little credit for that I brought to the party was I said, I've seen some companies that have done very well starting up here, but as they've gone to their Series A or Series B, where we needed sort of national level funding, these $50 million, $100 million checks, they struggled because when they reached out to California or New York, where these funds are based, some of these funds looked at and said, Burlington, Vermont, like, can a fundable company really grow up in Burlington, Vermont? And it took a long time to socialize those investors. But yeah, we've got a great ecosystem. We have great technology. We've got great people. And some of those companies were successful in getting funded, but some of them didn't and really kind of ended up in limbo. And for the VGAN semiconductor firms, what we wanted to do was find who nationally is making semiconductor hardware investments. It has a track record. And we want to get those people into the room and into the conversation right now. And so we spent a bit of time doing some due diligence, and I was happy to say we found this sort of Intel Capital, RTX Ventures, both affiliated with RTX and Intel, obviously, but they run these separate funds that are really looking for cutting edge semiconductor device technology. We reached out to them and said, hey, would you be willing to sit on this vegan venture group? We're going to get together every 6 months, and we're going to talk about what are we doing in this hub? What does the ecosystem look like? And what are we missing? And as companies are growing in this, there's going to be opportunity for them to mentor these companies, to get to know them. And hopefully there's some funding opportunities where they look and say, hey, we've known about them from the get-go and we want it. But they may not, but that's okay. They are really committed to helping make sure this tech hub is going to have what it needs to start these companies up and have the funds available.
So the three co-hosts here, each in our own ways with our own respective businesses, are working on new enterprise here in the state, in technology, tech and tech-enabled businesses, and have a dedication to the wider map of Vermont, right? And as a person who was working on a high-tech accelerator program last year in central Vermont, I can say that a lot of people are skeptical about how are we going to spread the wealth, if you will. So if because for ease of use here in our conversation, if we all agree that a place on the map needs to make itself attractive for people to live first and foremost, right? If I can't find a home, if I can't find access to other things I need just to live, I'm probably not going to live on that point on the map, right? So assuming you make yourself an accessible and desirable place to live, how then can communities outside of the Chittenden County area take advantage of this ongoing project?
That's a great question. And answering that is really speaks to the primary reason that I was really excited to take this role, because this project will only be successful if it is a statewide and really region-wide, because we include the counties on either side of Dartmouth and the counties across the top of New York State going out to Clarkson as well. They're all rural communities with great tech assets, but with significant portions of the community that have sort of been left out of the prosperity boom of the past 10 years. And what we've ended up with on this project, somewhat by design, somewhat accidentally, is we believe that the way this project will scale is going to be very attractive for the counties outside of Chittenden County. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making the resources that are necessary to develop the latest gallium nitride technology at well below market rates and also accelerated in development time. So the software tools that are required to design these devices are going to be available at basically academic rates for Tech Hub members, which is about 10% of the cost of the retail rates. And they're going to be available on a sort of a library card basis. If you need it for 3 weeks, you can have it for 3 weeks. You don't have to sign a 1-year license agreement. These software packages cost close to $500,000 a year for a commercial license. So it's a lot of money. And if you're a small company, you just don't have those resources. Global Foundries is going to be running a prototyping lab where the cost of doing this prototyping is going to be about half of what a retail cost would be. More importantly, it's on a predictable schedule. So for very, very small runs, in the past, they've kind of said, look, we'll handle it, but we're not going to get in the way of our big customers. We're going to just do it whenever we have time. And the complaint they heard and we heard was whenever they're successful, they don't have time. And these projects can get pushed months or years. And if you're a small company and you're burning capital, you don't have that time. And so the advantage we're going to have is it's going to be on a set schedule. They're going to run three runs a year. And so we can tell somebody, if you can have your designs done by April 15th, you'll be in the May run. And so it's on a set schedule. And finally, we've got a characterization lab with experienced test professionals available on a consulting basis. And so our goal is that you'll get your development done in about a quarter of the time and a quarter of the cost, about half the time. The catch is you have to do the design work in our region, in Vermont, in the rural counties of New Hampshire and New York. And so our expectation is that companies that are playing in the high frequency and high power space are going to come to the conclusion that if we want to lead here, we need to have a development office in that region. And our role is to really put them together with the economic development folks in Rutland and St. Johnsbury and Regents. We're not going to pick favorites here. We're gonna encourage those regions to say, hey, look, have housing available, make sure you understand what commercial space is available, and have wide bandgap communications available, and they can dial into the computing center. And these are going to be 5 to 25 person offices. So these are not we're not talking about building another GlobalFoundries fab, with very high paying professional jobs. So we're excited that we're going to see some real semiconductor experience populating this region, across the region.
This sounds like a great combination, a great synergy with the hubs that have been growing for the last 4, 5, 6 years. Black River Innovation Campus in Springfield, which has a major software and tech focus in this space. Also the hub in Rutland, many others throughout the state that are in these more rural communities and areas that, as you said, it would be a relatively low lift to set up a small office in these regions, but you have this access to these resources by being located in this area. You don't have to be in Chittenden County to have that advantage. And if it's 3 runs a year and you have your characterization lab right there, does a team even need to travel?
Right. That's the point, is stay where you are, Vermonters, wherever that is.
Build where you are.
Build where you are, right? So that that you're building a business to benefit your neighbors and yourself and everybody else that would come there from somewhere else, so that you're both attracting and retaining population at the same time.
And also just a plug for other, quick plug for other resources is the Center on Rural Innovation, Corey, with Matt Dunn. Big push to make sure that startups and innovators throughout the rural parts of the state are receiving the support and the financing that they need. So put those 3 together, a space like Brick, an organization like Corey, and a hub like Vegan. If you have a tech innovation in this space, there's a lot of opportunity happening.
No question. Well, you beat me to it. I was gonna give a shout out to Matt Dunn and his team at Corey, who are on our steering committee and very early on urged me to link up with the accelerators around the state. And they've all committed that they pledged more support than I even expected, basically saying if we've got innovators in gallium nitride in their regions, they're welcome to come and use Brick, the space on Main, the Mint in Rutland, free of charge for so many innovators in so many days to get themselves started. So yeah, if there's a small firm and they're not ready to actually build their own facility or rent their own facility, we've got great co-working spaces available to them with great connectivity. Brick was like, hey, we've got so much bandwidth coming to this building, we haven't even turned it on yet. We'd love a reason to turn on the rest of this bandwidth and really open up the taps. And so we hope to get
people are starting to notice that opportunity. Something I was hearing from Chris and Vin over at Black River Innovation Campus, just to plug that again, is in their last accelerator cohort, they are starting to see innovators coming out of the Boston area, coming up to Springfield, Vermont, because of the resources and the opportunity and the space to grow there. So people are starting to take notice.
You're talking about a third of their cohorts as of late have been actually relocating.
Not an inconsequential amount.
Yeah, I think we should also mention, though, that in addition to just the kind of startups that need co-working space, right, that are sort of light on space needs, but we also, because of the product here being made, I think there's a longer term play for Vermont to create clusters centered around any number of different points on the map for light industrial manufacturing, for prototyping, for even heavy industry, right? And if we couple this as an example, one that comes to mind immediately is because the federal government is also reshoring a lot in the areas of not only renewable energy solutions itself, but just more broadly climate resiliency solutions. This is another opportunity in Vermont, and I will add particularly because many of these companies interested in either coming back to the U.S. or coming from wherever they are to the U.S. because of the extreme nature of the federal programming benefits, is that they're coming from places that, like Vermont, or places such as Vermont, because of the lifestyle, because of the access to, I mean, I'm hearing directly from would-be tenants of my properties, companies that, well, you've got rail trails, and, we're coming from a country where cycling is important. You've got it could be topography, it could be the kind of architecture generally. You've got strong central, small but strong central downtowns. Any number of things that people look and say, what are the aspects of where I'm coming from that'll make the households moving, right, to do the work of the business, make it attractive, desirable, make them feel a little bit like home as they make this major move. And we're only at the cusp of that here in Vermont, of even being conscious that that's possible.
Sounds like you're talking about knowledge towns.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dominic Endicott.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Dominic and I are working together on some of these things. Yeah.
So
exactly.
So Doug, it sounds like, really this whole application process too, you guys are ultimately doing a lot of the boot work and the pre-work that really any individual innovator or group of innovators that are trying to, get a startup going, or even people that are thinking about investing from inside or outside of Vermont into this space, that document, that process is giving them some guidelines, right? Some rails. So if they want to be thinking about it now, I would encourage them, just like myself, I'm going to go look for that and dig a little deeper into that to understand what you have proposed. But, even though you guys did have a moment of mourning because it didn't go this round, like, it's not really dead, right? It's fully alive. It's a living document, I would imagine, that you are still talking about and evolving. And I would hope and think that more people involved in that conversation is a good thing. So I'm curious too, are there any folks that you can speak to now to sort of come out of the woodwork as part of that process, or recently since that process, and are really engaging with you around that document to kind of formulate their strategies, whether the money comes to you guys now or not? They may be looking for investors, and your guidelines could be helping them get there, not to mention setting them up for the right next steps when that money does come for you folks. So I'm hoping you can elaborate on that a little bit. Maybe if you have any examples, it'd be awesome, or even just some hypotheticals of how folks might think about working with you and looking to that document as a guideline to structuring their business strategy or forward strategy.
Sure. Since July 2nd, we've had a number of conversations with different stakeholders. Primarily, so that we have a group of stakeholders that develop the software that designers use to determine how to make these devices. And the three companies that we've been working with a lot are Cadence, Keysight, and Siemens. I think they were the first three to reach out after the second, and they said, look, this project is far too important to fail. They look at this as a requirement for their business plan. I mean, their software is incredibly complex and works unbelievably well on the silicon substrate. But what they're saying is we don't understand enough about the material properties of gallium nitride to provide the same level of service to our designers in gallium nitride that we can in silicon. And I think the software is called EDA, Electronic Design Automation, which is confusing since we're being funded by the EDA. So that's caused a lot of confusion over the past 9 months.
Is that unintentional?
What's with all you tech people and your abbreviations and things?
Our TLAs, our three-letter acronyms. And I think the EDA software is one of the sort of the unsung gems of the U.S. Technological market. I mean, people talk a lot about the lithography machines in Netherlands and Intel and things like that. But if you don't have the software to do these designs, and some of these designs can take almost a year to develop the circuits, then develop the architecture, simulate it all, and it's just thousands of man years of work. This software is incredibly complex, and the U.S. right now has a really significant lead on any other country in the world on this software technology. Gallium nitride is an area where we could lose that lead. There are a lot of countries working on it. We're not going to get it simply by just kind of hoping it happens or waiting around. There are people with active strategy. So the EDA software providers are basically saying, look, Doug, we need to sit down and figure out how do we make this work? And if we're not going to receive phase 2 funding, let's look for other funding sources. Our colleagues at the Northeast Microelectronics Coalition, they're one of the 6 microelectronics commons around the country, is also working with the electronic design enablement firms. And so they've suggested, hey, let's get together with them and figure out, can we come up with an interim solution where we can partner with them? We're an NEMC member. We've got great cooperation back and forth with them. They really appreciate our access to Fab 9. And so we've been talking to them about, okay, if we can't give a designer access today because we haven't been funded and don't have our own licenses, can we piggyback off you? And so we're working through those questions to figure out how can we make that work and not slow down. We may not have as much capacity as we would on day one with full funding, but we want to make sure we don't have to say no to a potential innovator that wants to get started today. And I think there are other examples. Keysight is another example. They are coming to us and saying, look, we don't want to wait to get this lab online. They not only are they an EDA provider, but they supply they're sort of the leading supplier of the test equipment itself that high power and high frequency users have, and they've been a key supporter of us from day one. They're saying, we don't know of another lab that's going to be open to the public in the country that your lab is, and we just see so much need and demand for this that we need to figure out a way to make this happen. So it's only been a month, but the discussions have been in place to say, look, how do we make sure this happens? We applied last week for a grant from the National Semiconductor Technology Center, which is a public-private consortium for workforce development. They're called the Workforce Partnership Alliance, WPA, Workforce Partnership Alliance, I think. And that'll be $1.5 million grant to get our workforce development program started. We'll find out in September if we won that. And it's really what we proposed in the Tech Hub proposal. It's not the whole thing. It's only 2 years, and it's only 2 of the tracks we proposed, but it's going to get it started.
Awesome. Well, this is all really, truly great information, Doug. It offers our listeners a lot of good insight. And hopefully, if you're listening out there, whether you are in the great state of Vermont or not, if you're concerned with rural tech and what it really means for economic development possibilities for your community, we hope that this really gets you thinking that much more about how to make stuff happen, right?
Scott,
Innovation and rural opportunity.
That's right.
One
Doug,
last
go
plug.
ahead.
If you've got any questions at all, look at vgan.tech. You'll find a lot of information there, and you'll also find ways to reach out and contact me if you'd like to. Happy to talk gallium nitride anytime with anyone for any length of time, as you're seeing right now.
Definitely appreciate the work you're doing on this and such. And
well, thanks.
Happy to
I appreciate you helping me get the word out. This is great. It is a somewhat complex topic, and I think your questions are going to make it much more understandable for everyone.
SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast is a production of M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com.